Hello everyone and Happy New Year to you. Well, it's the Friday the 3rd of January. It's coming up on 10 to 10 in the evening, and just wanted to talk about the first several months of Labour, particularly Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. I don't think I can remember any time in my nearly 30 years of living in the UK of a government that has been so hated within a relatively short period of time. I mean, we had 14 years of the Conservatives, and they were an absolute shit show, but at least you knew that you were being screwed from the moment that you got up in the morning to the moment that you went to bed at night. The sheer lies told by Starmer and his team pre-election, as opposed to what they're actually doing now, is just astounding. I I've come to the conclusion that anybody that votes Labour again has obviously had a lobotomy in some way, shape, or form, or are just mentally, mentally just gone. Um, so I suspect one of a couple of things are going to happen. One is that they're almost certainly going to get absolutely trounced at the local elections in May. I think the news today was that 20 Labour councillors resigned from from a council um, in protest at the direction that Keir Starmer and his team are taking. Um, but secondly, I think generally speaking, there's a lot of buyer's remorse happening at the moment around the country. Um, I've been following this for a little while now, because normally I kind of say, well, you got to give these guys a chance because they've only been in office now for just over 8 months. But in that 8 months, they have completely and utterly trounced any kind of faith in politicians to do the right thing, because they've just basically reneged on everything that they said. I mean, this, if you had said to me, for example, that one of the first major announcements that Labour was going to make was going to take away the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, albeit that it's now going to be means tested and stuff, I would have thought that you were a mental case. Now, even with when you take into account that it is going to be means tested, it means that about you know there's a significant proportion of pensioners fall literally a couple of quid under that allowance, which means that they don't get that allowance anymore, that winter fuel allowance anymore. It's just crazy. And I know there's for and against things like inheritance tax on farms, but we all know how much land has increased in value in the last few years. So even somebody on a relatively smaller farm could end up paying a lot of inheritance tax. And most of the, certainly around here, and I can only speak from personal experience because I live just outside of Bristol in a little village called Pill, and there is a big farming community around here as well. And all of the farms around here are fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation farms that have been handed down to the same family to continue on the farming side of things. If the inheritance tax, and I look, I understand why people are for and against it, but I think it was a silly thing to do, to impose inheritance tax on farmers, because what it actually does is it drives farmers away from the farming industry in general, because they simply can't afford it, or they get to the point that they have to pay so much inheritance tax that they end up with a bill, which means that they have to sell off a portion of that land to pay off the bill, which means that the farm gets smaller and smaller and smaller through each generation, and it ends up the farm is no longer there. Um, Jeremy Clarkson put it quite nicely, actually, and I know people either love or hate Jeremy Clarkson as well, but he said you need a farmer 3 times a day. You need a farmer at breakfast, you need a farmer at dinner, and you need a farmer for your evening meal. And that's the way I look at it as well. So farming is hard enough. They don't make a lot of money, and I know a lot of people will say, that these farmers are very, very wealthy, but they're not. They're not cash wealthy. They're land wealthy, but they're not cash wealthy, type thing. The farm makes money by producing crops, type thing, and selling those crops. But the market in the UK is just a disaster at the moment. The supermarkets are insisting on very, very low prices for farmers, so they're spending an awful lot of money to grow this stuff in the first place. And when they do sell it, they don't make a lot of money on it. They're just about clearing a small profit on this every year. And then, of course, the HMRC gets involved and takes a chunk of that off them as well. So. But there you go. Then there's the tax rise for the national insurance tax rise for employers. I mean, for the Chancellor to say that this won't have an effect on the economy is tantamount to economic illiteracy, as far as I'm concerned, because what it really means is that while it wasn't a tax rise for employees, employers now will have to look very seriously on the amount of people that they actually take on. It also affects people that are looking for pay rises next year as well, because if the employer is spending more to employ those people in the first place, just at the back end type thing, from a tax perspective, they then have to reassess what they're going to do for payments for people, and it's just crazy. So for her to say that it won't affect the economy is, as I said, it's just economic illiteracy, as far as I'm concerned. So, but that's one thing. That's one of many things actually that this government have completely buggered up on over the last 8 months. I remember doing a video about 12 months ago saying that maybe it was time for change, and Labour could be a good option type thing. And there's a bit of buyer's remorse here on my side as well, I have to say, because I didn't vote Labour, by the way, in the last election. I did wish them well though, in the last election, because whatever your thoughts about Labour were originally, based on their manifesto, there was a lot of talk about change for the better and people were going to be better off, but none of that has come to pass. This thing about the £20 billion black hole, it's just complete nonsense. It's utter nonsense, because 20 billion in the overall scheme of things for government spending isn't a whole lot of money. It is a lot of money for you and I. If somebody gave us 20 billion, we'd be quite happy with that, because we'd be making about £13,000 an hour in interest on that alone. But to say that was the reason behind these tax rises, it's ridiculous. It's just, I would have been quite happy to pay an extra penny on income tax, for example, because that would have solved it instantly, type thing. And it would help generally speaking across all of the services, the public services that are in dire need of investment at the moment. But it is what it is. So where do we go from here? Well, two things are going to happen, as I said. One is they're going to get absolutely trounced at the local elections, and there's already talk. I was watching a few things today about, and that's the International Space Station coming in, by the way. I was watching a few things today on the New Statesman podcast, and there's already talks about a leadership challenge to Keir Starmer. In my opinion, and I've been right on these a few times over the last few years when I've done these videos. In my opinion, I give Keir Starmer about 3 to 6 months before there's going to be a leadership challenge. I would lay money that in 6 to 8 months' time there will be a new leader of the Labour Party. I think there's going to be a huge shift, generally speaking, as well, in relation to the entire leadership team at Labour. I think you're going to see a lot of new faces coming up. There's a few people that kind of spring to mind when it comes to potential replacement for Keir Starmer, and probably the one that sticks out for me is people like Wes Streeting, who's the present health secretary. He seems like an okay guy. He's got a very serious remit as it is as health secretary at the moment, but he seems to have a lot of support as well from the grassroots members of the Labour Party, and I think the Labour membership as well has taken a huge nosedive over the last 8 months. So they are going to have to do something, because Keir Starmer is a bit of an autocrat. He's got the charisma of a dose of herpes. Let's be perfectly honest with you. He's just useless as PM. He really is. I never thought I'd say that about him, because he seemed like an okay chap pre-election. If a little kind of monotone and monosyllabic type thing, but he is about as popular at the moment as a dose of herpes, as I said, because his personal approval ratings are worse than Thatcher's were at the height of the poll tax in the 80s. So that gives you an idea of how bad things actually are here at the moment. The tax burden now on the UK population is now officially the highest it's ever been. It is now on par with the end of World War II, and we have seen the biggest drop in overall living standards since 1972, and that's official. That's according to the Office of National Statistics, by the way. It's the biggest drop in living standards. Interest rates are still relatively high compared to what they were. There's no sign of them dropping anytime soon. The cost of living is still going up, in other words. So even though the inflation rate may have fallen, until we get deflation, the price is still going north. So I think 2025 is probably going to be a big turning point for UK politics in general. Loath though I am to say it, I think reform seem to be gaining more and more people. I looked at their website last week, and they had exactly 137,000 members that had joined the Reform Party. 7 days later, as I'm recording this video, it is now nearly 170,000 in less than 7 days. Well, just 7 days exactly, actually. And it'll be very interesting to see what it'll be in another 7 days' time. So there you go. What can you do? Now, I'm not a fan of reform, by the way. I think Nigel Farage is just a snake oil salesman type thing, along with the rest of the MPs that they have at the moment. But they're obviously striking a chord with a lot of people at the moment. They've overtaken the Conservative Party by leaps and bounds in relation to their membership numbers. So I think at the local elections in May, I suspect you're going to see a lot of reform candidates taking over from Labour and the Conservatives. And I think that's the step change that you're going to see within the first quarter and even into the second quarter of 2025. As I said, in my opinion, and this is purely an opinion, but I'm basing this just on what I've seen, what I've listened to, what I've read over the last kind of month or two, I would be extremely surprised if Keir Starmer is still PM in 6 months' time, based on the rumblings that are coming out of Westminster at the moment. There's already talks about a leadership challenge. He could also encounter a vote of no confidence. I can't see that happening though, because it would need, I think it's a minimum of 55 MPs to write a letter, and he still has an overwhelming majority anyway in Westminster at the moment. However, stranger things have happened. Our own local MP here, who is a Labour MP, is a perfectly nice chap. I've met him, I've spoken with him, and he's a very, very nice guy. And I'm sure, he's doing his best for the local community here. However, he must be under enormous pressure at the moment from constituents in general, because of the cost of living generally. Energy prices went up again on the 1st of January. Welcome to 2025. The daily standing charges are going up again in a few months' time as well, which means that the average dual fuel customer will be paying just over £1 a day just to be connected. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's £365, or just over £365 a year plus VAT. That's just to be connected. That's before you use a single unit of gas or electricity. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2025, I think. Politically in the UK, I think there's going to be some huge changes happening in 2025. 2026, which seems like a long way away, but I remember doing a video like this at the start of last year as well, thinking, 2025 seems to be a long way away, and then suddenly it's 2025. A year in politics is a very, very short time indeed. But as I said, I would be extremely surprised if Keir Starmer stays past 6 months from now. I think May is going to be the big test for him, which is the local elections, depending on the results that come out from that. And we all know Labour are going to get absolutely trounced in those local elections. Nobody's going to vote Labour at the next local election. Well, very few will. Maybe the hard Labourites will, but I think anybody that was kind of on the edge, at the last general election that voted Labour or voted Reform or whatever, they're certainly not going to vote Labour again. That's for sure. And you have to remember as well that it wasn't that people moved away from the Conservatives, for example, and voted Labour. It was that they voted Reform, but because of the first past the post system type election that we have here, Labour got in by default, essentially. Based on the share of the vote that way. So they have an awful lot to lose. I suspect as well that a lot of people that are Labour members will not be renewing this year. Certainly, and you look at the numbers that have moved over to Reform and that have completely abandoned the Conservative Party, for example. That's kind of frightening. But there you go. What can you do? Such is life. Anyway, I just wanted to wish you all a very, very happy new year. By the way, it's the Friday the 3rd of January, coming up on 10:05 in the evening. I'm back to work on Monday. Yay! I'm actually quite looking forward to going back to work now, actually. I've had a nice long break. But yeah, politically speaking in the UK, it's going to be a very, very interesting few months ahead. It should be fun and games, as they say. Anyway, as I said, have a great new year, everybody, and we'll speak to you all soon.